Hey, it's August the 21st, 2018. I wanted to have, I don't know, I'm not sure how long of a conversation with y'all right now. And it's inspired, and of course dedicated, it's a response to a video I'd seen earlier last night. And it was by a lady named Miss Violet. And Miss Violet, I'll leave a link below because I want to spread awareness for this sort of thing. Miss Violet was talking about empathy in the video. And she was discussing it in a way that, many people probably haven't. Or most people probably don't. For example, she is suggesting and questioning if perhaps people are experiencing collectively too much empathy. Too much. Much too much. That was her question. Now, a lot of people, you would assume, especially here in this country, they probably wonder themselves or hope to themselves or wish to themselves or whatever about people getting more empathy. They want people to have more empathy. They think, well, why don't people care about people and this and that, and they should have more empathy. That would be the prevailing sentiment that I'm sure you're experiencing people verbalize aloud. Right. Why don't people should care about people? They assume people don't have enough empathy for people, and Violet, what she was suggesting is that perhaps people have too much empathy for other people, and what this does is it causes pain, and it actually leads to further isolation. It's to further isolation. And it's hard to say what is a good thing or it's a bad thing, but the suggestion was that perhaps empathy leads to people being cut off from each other, in a sense. She's saying, what if people, they feel so much empathy that it drives them away. They feel the pain. Like, for example, they feel it at such an early age, this empathy. Maybe they're born feeling just way more empathy than other people on Earth. Well, what if they were born that way and it is just too painful? It's too much. It's overwhelming. So, as a child growing up, they learn to kind of close themselves off from those feelings. They're too painful. They close the door to that whole experience. It's too much. Because they have too much empathy. So they grow up, and you might look at them today as they're growing up and say, oh man, why don't you care about nobody? It seems like you only care about yourself. It seems like, this and that, you're wandering around not really knowing what to do with yourself. Alright, and the suggestion is not that they don't have enough empathy for other people, but that they probably have too much. This is why they've learned to close themselves off. The reason for this is because they're growing up into a society that causes them to do so. Right? It's imperative for survival for these people to close themselves off so much that they don't feel it. They don't feel this pain anymore because their social environment is of that nature. Right? It's so awkward. It's so nonsensical. It doesn't make sense. It's not supposed to. It's supposed to be destructive, and it is lots of the time. So people close themselves off. I would like to say that I don't know anything. Obviously, I don't know anything, but I would go ahead and lean towards that idea. The fact is that I think, it probably is that people have too much empathy. And this is what it leads them to being so closed off. This is what leads them, perhaps, lots of times, to not look like they care at all. Right. And I would go further to suggest that those getting addicted to the typical things, the alcohol, the drugs, and this and that, those people are exact perfect candidates of people who probably feel too much empathy, more likely. you know, because it would stand to reason that they'd be just driven to drugs just because they feel too much pain. They want to get away from it. And so they get addicted to these drugs no matter how illegal the drugs is. You know what I'm saying? People will risk a death penalty to do drugs. I mean, even if the drugs are going to kill them, like, that's the whole point of the game. Right? And people know this. They're not unaware of this. These drug addicts out here are not unaware of this. So, that would be my suggestion. You look at all these people, perhaps drug addicts, perhaps doing all these crazy things, maybe unthinkable things. And it could be the case that they have so much empathy, too much empathy, that they wind up going the extreme opposite way and just closing themselves off to anybody's feelings at all. All right, and maybe that would be the process. I want to discuss a couple things, current, but also, you know, kind of ancient in some regards. I want to put into the conversation the idea of saints. Hopefully my mouth doesn't get too dry. But I wanted to put in the conversation about saints because, you know, I did a little research a little while ago, and I don't want to get too far off on a tangent, but, you know, I was doing research on a particular saint. I wanted to know. I found out about a particular saint. His name is Saint Gerard. Believe it or not. So, Saint Gerard, I found out about him because here's what happened. I'm actually named after a great uncle of mine. He was in World War II. You know, he lived in America. He was a turret gunner. You know what I'm saying? He did some stuff. And, you know, I was named after him. But I come to find out through some research that more likely he was probably named after Saint Gerard, all right, which was a saint from out of Italy. Real person. People know about him. People said all these stories about him. Anyways, I was doing research. Oh, no. Someone called me. I was doing research on him, and I was reviewing his story, and this was a while back. And I kind of found out that it seemed, when you just step back and look at Saint Gerard's story, it seemed as though he in particular, I think a lot of people would agree, had too much empathy. He had an abnormal amount. He had too much. You know, and just to be real brief, like, for example, drop stuff. For example, you know, if people around him were hungry, he needed to feed those people. All right. So, like, if he had anything to eat, he would be sharing what he had to eat. He would cut it up into however many parts whoever's there needs to eat, and they're hungry. This was back in a time, in a particular time and place where a lot of people were hungry. A lot of people didn't have enough food. So if people were hungry around him, he needed those people to eat, even to the point where he was sickly. He was very much underweight and malnourished. All right. He had to, though. A lot of people wouldn't understand it. It kind of sounds counterintuitive. But I'm here to suggest to you that he had to. He had to. The reason is because if there was a person in a room hungry, he felt that person's hunger, even more so than his own. And you know, it's kind of hard to think about a world in which that works. But that is how his world worked. If that person was hungry, he felt it. He then felt starving. So, natural instinct is feed that person. It wouldn't make sense for him to feed himself because he's not worried about himself. His hunger means nothing. He doesn't even feel it. He feels that person's hunger across the room. So he has to feed that person. It just makes sense. Everything he does, although it sounds counterintuitive, it's very logical. It's very reasonable. It makes all sorts of sense. People injured around him, he's got to help them. People cold around him, he's got to give them his clothes. This and that. And he didn't have much. He had torn, tattered rags and stuff, man. He wandered around like a homeless person. All right? And this is a real story. You can go Wikipedia, do whatever you want. Okay, wandering around like a homeless person. A lot of people refer to him in a certain kind of ways, like basically afflicted. I would suggest to you he's probably autistic. It stands to reason, for lots of reasons, that he was probably autistic. For example, you know, he'd been seen doing a lot of different things, to include praying, but for hours and hours at a time, for days at a time, nonstop, just doing that. You gotta ask yourself, who's capable of that besides an autistic person? So all sort of evidence. And he felt people's hunger, he felt their pain, he felt this and that, more so than he felt his own. You might describe it as too much empathy, all right? And it'd be reasonable to describe it as that because, like I said, he lived like a homeless person, all right? He didn't have much at all. He made journeys and treks and stuff like that. He wound up, just living in homeless type dirty rags. He slept on people's dirt floors and this and that. Right? He wound up dying at an early age of disease. I forget which one, but they said. He died of a particular disease at an early age and lived in poverty. And that's about it. Help people, but the thing is, all the way down the line, you see all sort of stories about Saint Gerard and things that he did, right? To include one time, he did walk on water. That's the thing about it. A lot of people, they don't want to believe this and that. But Saint Gerard walked on water, saved a boat that was out at sea during a big storm. They were all going to die, certainly. Saint Gerard just walked out onto the sea, grabbed the boat, brought it to the shore. This is just a name, just to name one of the many, many things Saint Gerard was doing as he was dying, impoverished, wound up dying of disease. Right. That's a particular story, and I wanted to share that, but that's not untypical. Like that's kind of stereotypical of a lot of these saints. And there's so many stories of different saints. Right? I believe them or don't believe them, it don't matter to me, but those stories are out there. And I wanted to bring that up. And I also wanted to bring up like people in our age today. And might I suggest there probably are saints that do exist out there. Whether or not their story gets told, we'll find out. All right, but I want to talk about people today, and they're probably feeling that exact same thing, but their story isn't playing out the same as maybe Saint Gerard's, and certainly my story is not playing out as cool and pure as Saint Gerard's, but they're feeling that pain, and they're resorting to this and that, like I said, drug use and whatnot, very inexplicable behavior due to their overwhelming empathy. I wanted to say, basically I'm in agreement with that. And of course, concerning the topic material that we tend to dive into, not only on the internet, but in our personal lives, we're gonna see people, obviously we're gonna want to spread this word. We're gonna want to bring awareness to people, and we're gonna know that most people are closed off to it. They're not. I don't know, 90, 95, 99% of people are not going to want to even come close to this. What we're talking about. They're not going to touch it with a 20-foot stick. Right. And you might feel a certain way. My suggestion is don't get personally offended. Don't, don't look at that person all like, oh, they just don't care, this and that. Perhaps it's very possible that they have too much empathy, and therefore they're becoming overstimulated by what you're telling them. That's why it's impossible for them to believe it. What I'm here to tell you is, at certain points you got to know when people are ready for something. For some people, it's impossible for them to believe the kind of stories that we've been listening to and that we've been taking heed to. It's impossible. They're not ready for it. And I had to, before we get out of here, I'd be remiss to not bring up kind of an impersonal way that I've experienced that, like I've gone through a whole process in order to understand, in order to even listen to and witness to what certain things that people are saying. I've gone through a whole process in order to even make me capable of that. I'll let you know, most of my life I was not capable of hearing these sorts of things that Miss Violet shared with us, that all the others have shared with us. I was not capable. Perhaps the empathy was too much for me. It was too painful, and I just blinded myself off to it. I compartmentalized myself into not being capable of hearing these sort of matters. All right? It's nobody's fault but my own. I take sole responsibility, but at the same time, I gotta let you know, man, I was blind as hell. I could not see nothing. I couldn't hear nothing. There's a point And just because, you know, it's already kind of established, people know, and I want to share it just because a lot of people would probably have similar situations. But there was a point in my marriage with my ex-wife in which she was trying to tell me certain kind of details. Now, I already knew various details of her childhood and stuff like that. And let me just tell you, it was traumatic. It's traumatic. I have to assure you, it was not as traumatic as some of the stories I've heard, but it was traumatic all the same. It was really bad. All right. And one time, I remember specifically, she was reaching out to me to tell me these couple things, and it hit me from nowhere, and I didn't see it coming. And I gotta say, I don't remember exactly what I said, but I basically closed myself off. I basically said, you know, I basically put a hand up in front of her face, figuratively, and said, please just stop talking. You know, it's things like that that I couldn't even explain to you why I did what I did or said what I said. You know, I look back at it later and think, oh my gosh, how could I behave that way? How could I possibly behave that way? The short answer is, like I said, it's no excuses. It was all me, but I was very blind. I could not even, I could not even fathom these sort of things. And that empathy was too much, man. It was too painful for me at that time. But, and I'm glad that I went through this process. I'm very glad. I thank God all the time going through this process, which happened to have a lot of hardships and stuff like that. There's a lot of downfalls to it, you know, for sure. A lot of people have downfalls. But the thing is, now I am capable of witnessing. I'm capable of hearing it. I went through this process. It was a painful one. But now I can actually hear these testimonials. And certainly there's testimonials out in the world that are fake, that are lying, that are made up or maybe misguided. Certainly there are. I understand that. I'm a skeptic by heart, by nature. I know that. But at the same time, now I'm hearing stories that it may sound wild to other people. It may sound unbelievable to other people. But I know that they're true. I know that they're true in my bones because I heard the stories before. Because I've seen that movie before. Because I've seen how this plays out. I've seen it play by play. How people can slip down into this slippery, disgusting slope. It's going to wind up being a longer conversation. But I've seen it. And so when these people tell these stories about what they've seen and heard, it's hard to tell you how I know that they're accurate. It's hard to tell you how I know, but I do. I know it in my bones. Certain stories that are being shared are very accurate. And like I said, most people can't handle it because they haven't been through the process. You have to go through that process, unfortunately. And that process involves a lot of pain. It involves a lot of loss. But you have to go through that process to even be able to hear these people out. You know, most people are going to sweep this under the rug. I've heard stories where people get laughed out of the police department and this and that. You know, that does happen. That does happen, and I wanted to bring that up. But like I said, you know, it took a while for me to be able to wrap my head around those sort of things. A lot of people are so blind that they don't know what they're doing. And a lot of people who've been affected by these sort of things, they've come to understand just how blind people could be. Just how blind they could be. And it's not simply because they're bad people or they mean to do bad things. It's just that they are so lost, unfortunately. Either due to trauma or something else, they're gone. And they might come back, but ain't nobody in charge of that. Alright? There's going to be out there, I know the best of people. And I can tell you recently that I've seen the best of people not be able to understand, not be able to take it in, not be able to hear the kind of things that I hear, that we hear. And unfortunately, there's a process that has to be taken. But like I said, it's a slippery slope. And I wanted to end on a kind of a different note, a different topic that we talk about from time to time, and I find especially important and crucial. And that's the family, because this all revolves around family, you'll note. It's family. Now, I'm a person, like a lot of people, who have made many videos talking about the importance of family, especially in reference to the security that young children should be able to feel, should be able to live in. Right? We talk about it as being the only way to combat or basically oppose government as far as having any power. If the people are going to have any power at all, it needs to start in their families. A lot of people have expressed this, and I would totally agree. Totally. All right? But with what we are talking about here in these days, what I had to also stress is that the family structure and the family unit is the most dangerous thing that could possibly a child could be introduced into. Certainly. The family unit, we need to understand that it's the most dangerous thing on earth, perhaps. Because I'm here to tell you, look, everybody's family is going to die out. Just like every movement dies out. And I don't want to make this video too long, but we talked about it before, that every movement in the world has died out or is going to die out. Everybody's family is going to die out in total shame and embarrassment, to be honest with you. In fact, more people's families have died out in shame and embarrassment than live on this earth today. Assuredly. Alright, so it's going to happen, and it's going to continue to happen. People's whole families and lineages will die out in failure and shame. Alright? Statistically speaking, that's just going to be most of them. Alright, so that happens a lot. And what happens is the family, whatever was in that family, winds up dispersing. If they can happen to escape, they'll disperse and perhaps start another family or become a part of another family. Right, so that other family's dead. Most families have gone by that way here on Earth. They've just all died out, and we don't hear about them no more. All right. The interesting thing to note about a family is that it will disperse, it will shatter, and it will be no more. It will not exist no more. But there's a process that takes place while this is happening. All right, of destruction, of mayhem, of carnage, and this and that, surely, of conflict, spitefulness and things of this nature, greed. There's a whole process that goes into the dissolvement of a family, and typically it takes a couple of different generations, 2 or 3 perhaps, for this generational family to completely dissolve, to completely be no more. Sometimes it's overnight, sometimes it is generations long, right? And I would suggest before we get out of here that, as far as family goes, the quicker the better. If your family is breaking up and dissolving, I would say rip it off like a Band-Aid. And there's a reason for that. Like I said, lots of times people's families and family structures, they dissolve over time, perhaps over a couple different generations. While that's happening, everybody in the family, might I suggest for you, is losing trust for everybody else. They might play and pretend and talk to each other like they do have trust for each other, because like we were saying, they're family, but really there is no trust for each other. Really there's hatred for each other, and there's spitefulness, right? So, but in the structure of a family that's keeping together throughout this process, that's prolonging the process, in that family, everybody begins to not trust each other, and like I said, in fact, hate each other, but they still live with each other. They live in and around each other. And you'll note that they live in very private, where nobody sees, behind closed doors. After a while, things begin to fester. And this is naturally what happens with every last family, period, across the board. their family's going to dissolve. Like I said, it's better probably, like if you feel like you're in a family that's kind of dissolved, it's better to distance yourself and isolate yourself and not be a part of that family anymore, because like I said, it's a evolution that's inevitable. If a family sticks together, maybe like for example, they have financial wealth. If they have that kind of stuff and they're relying on each other about that, we know about a lot of very, very, very rich families, and they're disgusting. They're in tatters, and they're all disgusting, and everybody in that family is doing terrible things to each other, but they still remain in the family because of the money, because of that money, right? That's actually the most worst possible thing that probably could happen. It's better. I think it's better if your family were to be starving in the streets. Be honest with you, you would be better off if your family was starving in the streets rather than these people who are together in you know, by name and this and that, by relation, even though they hate each other's guts. They don't trust each other. And see, like I said, after a while that sort of situation festers and it leads into abnormal behavior. And before you know it, believe it or not, this is the origin, basic origin, all this pedophilia, all this incest. Like I said, it was a family that fell apart. It was a family, and that's what it was. That's where it came from. That is the origin. It fell apart, and instead of everybody disbanding and getting the hell away from each other, they just stayed together and hated each other, hated the sight of each other, hated everything about each other. It became so isolated that they were able to do disgusting things to each other, and that's how we got it that way. That is inevitably what happens to each and every family, period. Unless, like I said, and I'm only suggesting all this, I don't really know, but this is what I'm suggesting. Unless that family disbands immediately. And I gotta let you know, man, on a personal note, I'm very much in that boat. I seen what my family, I'm not going to get into it, and I'm not going to name names and stuff like that. Certainly there'll be a couple different people in my family might wander across this video, and they know exactly what I'm talking about. This family's been dissolved for a long time. It's incorporated a formula of failure, and it is what it is. Maybe they don't see that, maybe they don't know that, maybe they wouldn't agree with that. Perhaps we don't agree on so many things. But that's what I see. So as far as my blood family and stuff like this, so, you know, as you might already know, I see them and everything. But it's not the same. I distance myself just about as much as even possible, to be honest with you. Not because they're bad people, but just because, and they're not. I'm not saying that they are bad people. That's what's nuts. They're just a part of a family that's a wild, wild failure. And I know exactly what comes down the road. All right, so their best bet is to disband immediately, right? And I'm talking about a lot of different people, to be honest with you right now, but instead they're going to cling on. They're going to cling on to it. And behind closed doors, man, like stuff that I don't endorse is going to take place. Now, I'm not saying sexual activity or anything like that, but just behavior and the treatment of each other. I don't like it. I don't like the vibes, all right, and I get away from it. I suggest that you do the same. And for all those people out there who might be very lonely and think to yourself, oh man, you know, I wish I had a family and stuff like this, or maybe my family's not there. I might be suggesting that you might be better off without them. You might be so much better off without them. You might want to be very thankful that they're not there. Anyway, so I'll holler at y'all. It's August the 19th or the 20th. It's actually the 21st. 2018, and I appreciate y'all. It was a long one, and I appreciate y'all. All right, I'll holler at y'all a little bit later.